While preparing dinner for my husband's entire family, my sister-in-law joked, "It's sweet how you still try to impress him. He's always at my place anyway." I wiped my hands, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "That's why he'll be paying my rent next month, not yours." Silence. "My name's Alina Moresby. I'm 42, I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I can cook a dinner that makes grown men cry. Not bragging. Just saying, when you've spent 22 years playing house for a man who barely looks up from his phone at dinner, you either learn to do something right or you break apart in silence." That night, I was elbow deep in sweet potato mash, the oven timer blinking like a pulse in the corner of my eye, and the scent of rosemary, garlic, and caramelized onions wrapped the house like a memory. You know that smell, the one that reminds you of Thanksgiving at your grandmother's, when she still wore her wedding ring and talked like someone was listening. It was a Sunday, but it felt heavier than that. The whole family was coming. Benji's family, not mine. My people stopped coming years ago after my mom died and my sister moved to Tampa and decided family gatherings were too emotionally draining. Benji was outside with his brothers, drinking light beer out of bottles that had little sayings on the label like, "Wife said 1 beer," and "Grill Master." Real original stuff. The TV on the back porch was blasting a football game. I could hear their laughter through the sliding glass door. It was the kind of laughter that made my chest tight. Inside, the women had gathered in the kitchen like they always do, half helping, half sipping wine, and completely unaware of the tension under my skin. Benji's mom, Dina, sat at the far end of the island peeling string beans so slowly it looked like she was trying to stretch time. His Aunt Rosalind picked at the deviled eggs and made passive-aggressive comments about cholesterol. And then there was Sabrina. Sabrina was married to Benji's younger brother, Nolan. She'd always had that confident smirk, like life owed her something, and she knew exactly when it was going to be delivered. She had perfect eyebrows, polished nails, and the kind of voice that could be mistaken for sweet until you listened to the words. She was leaning against the counter, swirling a wine glass in that lazy, condescending way she does when she's winding up for a zinger. Everyone else was distracted, talking about grandkids, schools, gluten, but I felt her eyes on me before she even spoke. "It's sweet how you still try to impress him," she said, like it was an inside joke only she understood. "He's always at my place anyway." My hands were still slick with butter and sweet potato. I stopped mid-stir. The room didn't go quiet at once. It faded out slowly, like someone turning the volume down on a stereo. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. No one spoke. Even Dina paused her bean peeling. Rosalind's hand froze halfway to her mouth. I looked around at these women who had been in my house every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every damn 4th of July. They weren't family. They were witnesses. I reached for the kitchen towel, wiped my hands, turned to face her. She had that smile on like she'd already won. "That's why he'll be paying my rent next month," I said, slow and steady, "not yours." The words floated in the air for a moment. And then silence. Real silence. Not just the absence of sound, but that heavy, electric stillness that tells you a boundary just got redrawn. Sabrina's mouth twitched, just slightly. She wasn't expecting me to say anything. She thought I'd laugh it off, maybe force a smile, maybe cry later. But I didn't. See, what she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that for the past 3 weeks, I'd been talking to a lawyer. Quietly, carefully. I'd opened a separate bank account. I'd started documenting everything. Every receipt, every late night, every text message I accidentally found. I wasn't shocked by what she said. I was prepared. What shocked me was how easy it was to say it back. Benji wasn't the kind of man you fall in love with. He was the kind you grow used to. We met when I was 20, married when I was 23, and by 30 I'd figured out that he loved convenience more than he loved me. I was convenient. I cooked, cleaned, smiled at his parents, kept quiet when he came home late. I even learned to laugh when his jokes stung. But something started changing last year. Maybe it was the way he started looking at me like I was a chore. Maybe it was the way he complimented the waitress at Red Lobster but hadn't told me I looked nice in years. Or maybe it was just me. Something inside me finally woke up. Maybe it had been napping all these years, but now it was wide awake and pissed off. I didn't say anything else that night. I didn't have to. Sabrina avoided me for the rest of the evening. She left before dessert, citing a migraine. The men came in from the porch, red-faced and laughing, unaware of the emotional bomb that had just gone off in the kitchen. Benji sat down at the head of the table, carving the turkey like he was still king of the castle. I served plates, smiled, passed the gravy, played my part. But I knew I was done. The next day, I went to the bank and finalized the paperwork. My name only. A small apartment on the east side, Not fancy, but it had light. Real light. The kind that spills through windows at 7 a.m. and makes you feel like the day might be yours for once. I hired a moving company. Set the date. 2 weeks. Benji didn't notice the boxes at first. He thought I was organizing. Said something about finally clearing out that old junk in the garage. But the day I left, I didn't sneak out. I waited for him to come home from work, still in his khakis and that shirt with the little embroidered fish on it. I stood in the living room, surrounded by the last few boxes. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his keys. "I'm leaving," I said. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm done. With this house. With this marriage. With pretending you're still here when you're not." He laughed. Like a nervous tick. "Is this about what Sabrina said?" "She was just, no," I said. "This is about what you didn't say. For years." And that was that. He stood there, stunned, while I walked out the door. I wish I could tell you he chased after me. Or apologized. Or said anything worth remembering. But he didn't. He just stood there like someone unplugged him. It had been 5 days since I walked out of that house. I didn't cry. Not even once. I kept waiting for it, some moment in the middle of the night where everything would hit me, and I'd end up on the kitchen floor, ugly crying into a dish towel. But that moment never came. Instead, I slept like a log in my tiny new bedroom, under a cheap comforter from HomeGoods and the hum of an old ceiling fan that squeaked on every third rotation. I told people I moved for work. That I needed to be closer to downtown. I said it so casually that even I started to believe it. But inside, I was still reeling not because I missed Benji, but because the lies ran deeper than I ever realized. The night after I left, he didn't call. No texts. No begging. Just radio silence. Like we'd never happened. On the third day, I got a message from Rosalind. Just a photo of Benji sitting on the porch with Sabrina, drinking wine and laughing. No caption. No explanation. Just the image. I didn't reply. What was there to say? The truth was, I already knew. About a month before that fateful dinner, I'd found a receipt in his coat pocket for a necklace. Something expensive, delicate. Not the kind of thing Benji would buy me, especially not after he forgot our anniversary. The salesgirl at the jewelry store remembered him. Said he picked it out himself. Said he seemed nervous and excited. I never brought it up. I wanted to see how long it would take for the lie to show up on its own. Turns out, it didn't take long at all. Sabrina had been a fixture in our lives for 10 years. She married Nolan quickly, too quickly, if you asked anyone with sense. But she fit into the family like a missing puzzle piece. Her sharp tongue and perfect teeth made her instantly adored by Benji's mom, who always thought I was too serious. Looking back, there were signs. Slips in conversation. Inside jokes I didn't understand. A perfume scent on Benji's shirt that didn't match mine. I convinced myself it was paranoia. That I was overthinking. That women like me don't get cheated on, they get bored and ignored, but not betrayed. I was wrong. The following week, Benji finally called. "Hey," he said, like he was phoning in from a vacation. I didn't say anything. "You left." "Just like that?" "You were already gone, Benji." I just caught up. Silence. He sighed. "Look, whatever Sabrina said, she was drunk. She gets mouthy." I almost laughed. "That's your response?" "She was mouthy. It didn't mean anything." "Oh, it meant plenty. Maybe not to you. But to me, it meant everything." He tried to spin it. Said he was confused. That we'd been distant. That he thought I didn't care anymore. The usual script. The same lines every cheater keeps in their back pocket. "Do you love her?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. And that, to me, was the answer. After I hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. There was a crack near the ceiling, small but noticeable. And I just kept staring at it, thinking how something so tiny can split a house in two if you ignore it long enough. A few days later, Nolan showed up at my door. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him, like he hadn't slept in days. Hair a mess. Shirt inside out. "Can I come in?" I hesitated. Then stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the sofa like he wasn't sure if the furniture would hold him. His hands trembled. He looked down at them like they were strangers. "She told me everything," he said. "About them?" I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." He looked up, eyes red. "How long do you think it's been going on?" I stopped counting after the first lie. He swallowed hard. "I loved her. I really did." "I know." There was a pause, thick with unspoken things. "I left," he said finally. "Packed a bag. Took the dog. She doesn't even care." We sat in silence after that. Just two people in a half-lit room, trying to make sense of the wreckage. Later that night, I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed him one. We didn't toast. There was nothing to celebrate. But we drank anyway. He stayed for hours, telling me stories I didn't know, filling in blanks I hadn't even realized were missing. Things about Benji, about family dinners where I wasn't invited, about quiet moments that weren't so innocent after all. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake thinking about the years I gave to a man who barely knew me. About the version of myself I lost in that house, in that marriage, in trying to be someone worth staying for. But something had shifted. Something real. Not rage. Not grief. Just clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't waiting for someone to change or begging to be seen. I was just me. And that was new. The morning after Nolan left my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table staring into a cold cup of coffee. The quiet buzz of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. I wasn't waiting for anything in particular. I was just sitting in that space where thoughts echo louder than noise. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Dina. You've made a mess. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but your place in this family is not guaranteed. I didn't reply. She'd sent 4 messages since I left Benji. Each one colder than the last. Not a single one asking how I was doing. Not even a fake, "Are you okay?" It didn't surprise me. Dina had always preferred Sabrina, glossier, thinner, a little meaner. She said what people were too polite to say, and Dina liked that. Said it was refreshing. I always thought it was cruel. Later that afternoon, I walked to the small market down the block from my new place. I liked it there. It smelled like old lemons and overripe bananas, and the guy behind the register wore a faded Dolly Parton shirt and whistled off-key. It wasn't fancy, but no one knew me, and that was all I needed. As I wandered through the aisles, picking up basics, milk, bread, eggs, I heard someone call my name. Alina. I turned, and for a split second, I didn't recognize her. Trudy. She smiled. Trudy Coleman. We went to high school together. Hadn't seen her in maybe 20 years. She looked the same, just softer around the eyes, her once red hair now streaked with gray like a river of wisdom. Lord, it's been forever, she said, pulling me into a hug before I could even think. We stood in the canned goods aisle talking for almost 40 minutes. She'd been divorced for 6 years. Worked at the local library. Lived 2 blocks over. I heard you moved, she said gently, her voice lowering just enough to let me know she didn't want to pry. Yeah, I said. Started over. Good, she nodded. It's brave, you know. Most people don't. They just stay and rot. That stuck with me. We exchanged numbers. She told me to come by the library sometime, that they had book club nights and poetry readings and decent coffee. I said maybe, but inside, I was already thinking yes. That night, I opened my laptop for the first time in days. I didn't check emails. Didn't scroll through social media. I opened a blank document and just sat there. Words came slowly at first. I wrote about mashed potatoes. About garlic. About dinner tables where people laugh but don't listen. I didn't write about Benji. Not directly. But he was there, between the lines, in the silences. I wrote until my fingers cramped. It felt good. 2 days later, I got an unexpected knock on the door. It was Dina. Her hair was pinned up like always, her lipstick perfect, her expression tight. I need to talk to you, she said. I stepped aside. She walked in like she owned the place. Looked around with that half-impressed, half-judgmental face she always wore. I raised 3 boys, she started. And I've seen marriages fall apart. I know things get messy. But what you did, you embarrassed this family. I folded my arms, leaning against the counter. I left a husband who didn't love me. I didn't set a house on fire. You didn't try hard enough. I laughed once, quietly. 22 years wasn't enough trying? She flinched. Just slightly. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Her eyes moved around the room. No photos. No framed memories. Just me, in this small apartment, with boxes still half unpacked. You were the glue, Alina. Now everything's cracked. Then maybe you should ask yourself what kind of family breaks this easily. For the first time, she looked at me like a person instead of a disappointment. And maybe that scared her. Because she didn't say another word. Just turned around and left. The door clicked shut behind her, and I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. That night, Nolan called again. She kicked me out officially, he said. Said I was boring. Said I wasn't ambitious. You're better off. Yeah, he said. But it hurts. I paused. Yeah, it does. He was quiet for a moment. Do you think they were ever going to stop? Or did they just think we were too stupid to notice? I think, I said slowly, they never thought about us at all. And maybe that was the worst part, not the betrayal, not even the lies, but the way we were reduced to scenery in their story. Background characters in their drama. I started going to the library on Tuesdays. Trudy introduced me to a woman named Marnie who taught watercolor classes on the weekends. I went once, got paint on my sleeves, and laughed harder than I had in months. I stopped checking my phone for Benji's messages. There were fewer of them now anyway. The last one just said, "You've changed." I didn't reply. Because yes, I had. But not in the way he meant. Weeks turned into months, and life found a new rhythm. I painted every Sunday with Marnie, even though I was still terrible at it. Trudy and I started walking the Greenway Trail every Thursday morning before she opened the library. She brought coffee in mismatched thermoses and called it therapy with sore knees. I laughed more in those first 3 months than I had in the last 10 years. One afternoon in early March, I got a letter from the lawyer. The divorce was finalized. I sat with the envelope for a while before I opened it, tracing the return address with my thumb like it was a wound that had already scarred over. No fanfare, no dramatic flair, just some papers, a final agreement, and a check with Benji's neat little signature at the bottom. Spousal support. More than fair. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear I'd expose the real reason things ended. Or maybe, just maybe, he finally understood what I'd carried all those years. Either way, it paid the down payment on a small brick storefront near downtown. The windows were tall, dusty, and full of potential. I opened a cafe. I called it The Second Spoon, a nod to the woman who always had to stir the pot a little more before the flavor was right. Cozy chairs. Worn wood tables. A shelf of donated books. Quiet music and soft lighting and fresh cinnamon rolls made from a recipe I'd never shared with anyone, not even Benji. It became a place people came to breathe. Sometimes, Nolan stopped by. He brought his dog and drank black coffee and told me about his new job at the college. He looked lighter, like someone who finally remembered what his own laugh sounded like. One day, late spring, I was wiping down a table when I saw a familiar figure standing just outside the cafe window. Benji. He looked older somehow. Less polished. His shirt wasn't tucked in and his expression had that searching quality, like someone trying to find a street that used to be familiar. I didn't invite him in. Just opened the door and leaned on the frame. "You own this place?" he asked. I nodded. Every inch of it. He looked past me into the cafe. "It's nice. Real nice." "Thank you." He shifted awkwardly, like he was standing on uneven ground. "I heard, you're doing good." "I am." He nodded again. "I thought maybe we could talk." I didn't move. Just kept my eyes steady on his. "There's not much left to say." He looked down, then back up. "I messed up." "You did." He waited, maybe for me to soften, to open the door wider, to offer coffee or kindness or something resembling regret. But I didn't. "You look happy," he said finally. I smiled, but not for him. "I am." He left a minute later. I watched him walk away, back down the sidewalk, past the bookstore and the post office, into whatever life he was trying to patch together. And just like that, he was out of mine. Sabrina tried to reach out once, an Instagram message full of passive-aggressive sweetness and some vague comment about women supporting women. I blocked her before I finished reading. Revenge didn't come in the form of a slap or a scandal. It came in the quiet, steady way I rebuilt myself. In the scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee every morning. In the laughter that filled my cafe. In the stories people told me while they waited for their tea. And in the small, locked drawer behind the counter, I kept the original copy of the rent agreement. Benji's name on the lease of the apartment I no longer lived in, still paying monthly. He never asked to change it. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he's too embarrassed. Or maybe, deep down, he knows he owes me that much. And every month, when the bank deposit comes in, I pour myself a cup of coffee, sit at the window, and watch the world move on without him. Not bitter. Not broken. Just better. A year later, I stood behind the counter of the Second Spoon, scribbling a note on a napkin to a customer who'd just lost her father. She came in every Thursday after her grief group met at the rec center across the street. We never said much, but she always ordered the lavender tea and sat in the same corner. Some people don't need words, they just need a place. The cafe had grown into more than I imagined. We hosted open mic nights, recipe swaps, and a monthly meetup for women over 50 who'd left their marriages and didn't know where to begin. I called them the After Girls. They called me the General. Every week, someone brought wine in a thermos. Trudy now managed the morning rush with a speed that had put any barista to shame, and Marnie's paintings hung on one full wall, wild splashes of color, every piece named after something that once hurt her. The day the cafe made it into Southern living, Benji sent a message. Saw the article. Congrats. You always did make things beautiful. I didn't reply. Some stories don't need sequels. Nolan married again, someone kind, with a crooked smile and a big laugh. I sent a gift card to their favorite Italian place and never asked for details. Sabrina moved to Austin, last I heard. Started a wellness brand or something. The kind that sells vague empowerment and essential oils for $80 a vial. I wish her nothing. Not well. Not harm. Just nothing. I moved out of the apartment Benji once paid for and bought a little house with a yellow door and space for a garden. Peonies in spring. Tomatoes in the summer. A fig tree out back that I talk to more than I should. On Sunday mornings, I sit on the porch with my coffee and a crossword. Sometimes neighbors wave. Sometimes I just watch the light change across the roof lines. There's peace in knowing I don't need to be anyone's wife, savior, or second choice. And revenge? It was never the goal. But it's sweet in the smallest, simplest things. A full cafe. A quiet home. And knowing, without a doubt, that the life they tried to burn down is now the one lighting up the street. They thought they buried me, but really, they just planted me somewhere better. Let me know if you'd like alternative phrasing or tone, something softer, bolder, or more poetic.